There we go.
There we go. Good morning to everybody. This is the learning group of Hadassah, chapter 13 of Nechemiah. Hopefully we'll be able to finish the chapter today, and it could be exciting. We're going to have our Siyum on July 6th. July 6th will be our Siyum, and I just sent out an email to everyone about the Siyum, so please check your emails. It came from Hadassah, so Hadassah Modian, so please check all the details to RSVP for the Siyum. Okay. We're hearing some background noise from some people, so could everyone please mute themselves if you feel like you've got noise going on in the background. Okay, so last week we started chapter 13. We talked extensively about could everyone mute themselves, please? It's very hard to talk about.
Rhonda, I'm trying.
Oh,
I'm trying.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Rose.
But I can't find Zoom. Where's my Zoom?
Rhonda, can you mute everyone?
That might be challenging for me. Let's see. The truth is, I really don't see how to do that.
Go to the upper right-hand corner of your photograph, your picture that's on the screen,
Yes.
and you'll see the word either mute or unmute. Put your pointer on it.
Well, that's mute for me, not for everyone else.
No, but maybe she said she couldn't find it. But
Oh,
that's
okay.
where it is.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I just muted everybody. Okay, you can't talk. All right. So last week we were working with the all this wonderful information about the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, the assembly of the great men of that time. And we learned that the Great Assembly made a lot of rules and regulations concerning muksa, about Shabbat, about they developed and wrote Havdalah, Brachot, the Shmona Esrei. These are things that happened in Nehemiah's time that we still do today. We are still doing the things that the Knesset, the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah felt that people all over the world who were not living in Israel needed to be unified in their practice and participation of Judaism. That they saw that someday there would be no longer sacrifices, and no longer would we have the Beit HaMikdash. And they knew because of this that there had to be a substitute, and prayer became the substitute. The Shmona Esrei, the Amidah, became the substitute for sacrifices in the Beit HaMikdash. And so consequently, a lot of the things that we are learning about in Nechemiah is pertinent to us today, relevant as if it was decided upon today. And that's the beauty of this Sefer that we are learning. Every time I read the chapter over or read about it, I am so touched by the fact that we are so connected to Nechemiah. We're really connected to him. So let's continue. Rhoda, can you unmute yourself and read for us, starting with Pasuk 16, please? And we'll read as much as we can, and then we'll go through each of the Pasukim.
Okay, 1 minute. Someone said-
Okay, so Pasuk 16, you could go to 15. Go ahead, start at 15.
13, 14.
Chapter 13, Pasuk 15.
Here's 14. In those days, in Yehuda, some treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in sheaves of corn and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, figs, and all manners of burden, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I forewarned them on the day on which they sold food. There dwelt men of Zor there also, who brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath to the children of Yehuda and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Yehuda and said to them, what evil thing is this that you do and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your father do thus? And did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? And yet you bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath? And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut and charged that they should not be open till after the Sabbath. And I set some of my servants at the gates, so that no burden should be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kinds of ware lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. Then I forewarned them and said to them, why do you lodge about the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and that they should come and guard the gates to keep the Sabbath day holy. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to thy abundant love. In those days also I saw Jews who had married wives of
Okay, so stop there. Stop at 23 and let's go back to Pasuk 15. Okay, we'll discuss that. All right. Okay. In those days, I observed in Judah, the people were treading on the wine presses on the Sabbath. Well, Nehemiah's goal was to get all the people to observe Shabbat. He felt that there were several principles of Judaism that he had to tackle with the people at that time. One of which was intermarriage, one was Shabbat, and the laws of Shabbat, which the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah would eventually create laws of Shabbat. And he took it very seriously to get the people back on track. He had been gone for a little while, as we mentioned last week, and he comes back and he sees that Shabbat is being violated once again. Now, this is, we don't know exactly how long he was gone, but we know that when he left to go to Persia for a short time, the king probably had summoned him and said, listen, how long is it taking you to get those Jews in order? And Nechemiah probably said, you would not believe it, how tough it is to get these Jews on target. But being that as it may, Nechemiah comes back and they had, right before he left, signed an agreement, a covenant with God that they were going to observe Shabbat. And now they're off the derech again. And it's not that long that he was gone. So he observes people not only working on Shabbat, but then bringing the wares into Jerusalem to sell. And he just decides this is totally unacceptable, and he will not allow these provisions to come into the market and be sold on Shabbat. He also, in verse 6, 16, I'm sorry, he also observes that the Tyranians, now they were probably from Tyre, from the north, were selling fish on the Shabbat. And they were mainly in Jerusalem. And they figured, well, no one's stopping anybody else from selling things. So why can't I sell fish, fresh fish that I've brought in from, wherever they caught it. And so consequently, Nechemiah is not happy. And he goes to the leaders of the community and he says to them, what are you doing about this? We had an agreement. You signed a covenant. We would not violate the Shabbat. What is going on? And the people said, well, what's such a big deal? Probably, you bring in a little fish, we have a little gefilte fish for Shabbat, whatever. So he shuts down the sellers completely. And as a result of this, his intense feeling for the laws of Shabbat, the Anshe Knesset Hagadola creates the laws of Shabbat and Muksa. And that we learn eventually when these laws were prepared by the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, what we can, things and utensils, objects that are prohibited on the Shabbat and permissible on the Shabbat. Only things that we truly need and use on the Shabbat that doesn't violate any of the Torah commandments can be used or moved, and other things are not allowed and prohibited. And we are, in an effort to make a stronger connection to the Shabbat, these laws were made to make Judaism stronger. And they made people also aware of the sanctity of the Shabbat. Now, in Pasuk 18, it says,
Not your father do thus?
okay, so it said, he says, so I battled, 17, so I battled the aristocrats, which meant he confronted them and he told them about how he felt about the Shabbat. And then in 18, did not you, your ancestors do this? And then our God visited all of this evil upon us and the city. In other words, don't you remember what happened right before the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the Beit HaMikdash? Don't you remember your forefathers who left Judaism, who went astray and just did not do the right things during Shabbat and the Chagim and what was proper in the observance of Torah law? How much does it take for you to have to understand that if you violate these laws, if you violate Shabbat, you will have the same history as your forefathers? So apparently people have very short memories, and Nechemiah is trying to shake them into a reality where they understand what needs to be done. So he says to them, and you bring additional wrath against Israel by desecrating the Shabbat. In other words, bringing in these vendors and sellers of things, and what for what? What is your purpose here except to add disgrace and violation against our sacred city? So in 19, it says, then it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem, cast a shadow before the Shabbat, Nechemiah says, he decrees that he gave the word that the doors be closed. In other words, when he saw the shadow, not when it was dark and it was Shabbat, but probably at sunset, at Shkia time, he had the doors, the gates of Yerushalayim locked, so that no vendor, no seller would come into the city and violate the Shabbat and desecrate the streets. And he also made sure that people understood there would be no one coming in to sell them provisions that they could eat or cook on the Shabbat. So this was a multifaceted decree. He then goes on to say, then it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem, he gave the word. I gave word, do not open them, meaning the gates, until after the Shabbat. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates, so that they know that no load or no materials, provisions would arrive on the Sabbath. So he really has basically locked down the city for Shabbat, and he ensures that there will be no one opening the gates, because he appoints his own team of gate watchers, gatekeepers. And
has there been such a change in people? I mean, can you just imagine that happening today? There would be a huge revolution. People just simply would not listen. They would not. I can't imagine that they listened so well at that particular time. People are people, and history repeats itself so much. I'm shocked that they didn't listen, that they listened.
Well,
no, because there are lots of places where there are gates. And
absolutely. In the old city, they close off the streets. You can't get through the old city on Shabbat.
The gate also now that is closed.
Yeah, in I believe Mea Sharim and a lot of Yeshuvim, Beitel, B'nai Brak, there's no traffic. It's closed down.
Ours too. We live in the south. It's closed.
Yeah, so
you can walk in, but you can't drive in. It's locked.
Right. So we may think that's pretty harsh, but the truth of the matter is there are areas that still do that today. Okay, so
thank God I don't live in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. All right, it's a different lifestyle there. All right, then it says that in Pasuk 20, then the merchants and the sellers of all kinds of wares slept outside Jerusalem. And Nechemiah says that he goes to them and he says, why do you sleep next to the walls of Jerusalem? Why are you here? If you repeat this, I will punish you. So Nechemiah says there's absolutely no point for you to be outside the gate, because no one's going out and nobody's coming in. So you leave, you understand? He says, because it's not appropriate for you to be here. So he issued the riot act to them and they left. And they listened to him at that time. So Nechemiah is pretty machmir about traffic and sellers outside of the city as well as inside of the city. And then in Pasuk 21 or 22, he says, then I told the Levites that they should purify themselves and come and guard the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. This too, remember okay, so what happened here? When it says he told them to purify themselves and come to the gates. He said to the Levites who were the gatekeepers, you know, it's not Shabbosdik for you to come to work on your shift after Shabbat starts. So you go to the mikveh before Shabbat, you purify yourself, you come into the city, and you take up your post before the Sabbath begins, so that the people will understand that you do not go to work on Shabbat, that you are an essential worker, but you come before Shabbat and you stay until your watch is over. So he instituted this coming to work and purifying yourself prior to the Shabbat beginning. The gates are locked. There's no merchants in the city, and he hopes that the sanctity of the Shabbat will permeate those who live there and will make all the sacrifices that are made on the Shabbat at the Beit HaMikdash even more holy for the people and to understand. So he's really gung-ho on making Shabbat very special. And he says, this too, remember for me, my God, that I am compassionate. He's really taken Shabbat to a new level, and he hopes that God will bless him. All right, Zamira, can you start with 23 and start reading, please?
Sure, just a second. 23. Also in those days, I observed the Jews who had married Ashdodite, Ammonite, and Moabite wives. Half the children spoke Ashdodian and did not know how to speak the language of the Jews, and likewise with the language of each nation. So I contended with them, and I cursed them. I beat some of their men and tore their hair out. Oh boy. I made them swear by God that you not give your daughters over to their sons, nor marry their daughters to your sons or to yourselves. I said, did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin with such women? Among the many nations, there was never a king like him. He was beloved by his God, and God appointed him king over all of Israel. Yet the alien wives caused even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you to do all this great wickedness, to be unfaithful to our God by marrying alien wives? One of the sons of Jolada, son of Eliashib, the Kohen Gadol, was son-in-law of Sanballat, the Horonite, so drove him away from me. Remember them, O my God, for the desecration of the priesthood and of the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. And so I cleansed them from all that is alien, and established the watches of the Kohanim and of the Levites, each one according to his task, and for the wood offering at the scheduled times, and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good.
Okay.
Wow. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so now let's go back and see what this all really means, because there's a lot of stuff going on here. All right. Pasuk 23. So now he leaves the Shabbat. Shabbat is done.
Mhm.
But now he takes on his next task, because he says in those days he observed the Jews who had installed or married from the Ashdodite and the Ammonites and the Moabites. Now they've taken on foreign women and intermarried once again.
So they got rid of him. And then when he was gone, they
He-
brought him
They
back.
did it again.
They did it again. Now there's a prohibition against the Ammonites and the Moabites that we learned about. So he says half their children spoke Ashdodot, and they did not know how to speak their language of the
Yeah.
Jews. Now we don't know whether it was Hebrew, they didn't know how to speak Hebrew, or they didn't know how to speak Aramaic. We're not sure which was the language he's referring to, but the Hebrew was Lashon HaKodesh, and the Aramaic may very well have been the language of the street language. So he says they're so intermarried, they're so assimilated that they can't even speak the language of their fathers. So this really, really upset him. And he says to them, so I battled, he fought against them. He battled against them, then I cursed them, then I beat some of them, and then I tore their hair out, and I made them swear by God, if you give your daughters over to their sons, or if you give your daughters to your sons or their daughters, it's back and forth, or even yourselves, you are going to face my wrath. So the Mefarshim really say that this was a process that Nechemiah took upon himself. He didn't go out one day and swear and curse and beat them up and tear their hair out, maybe a literal thing for beating them up or doing something painful to them. We don't really know. I don't know whether tearing your hair out was something that was done back then. I don't know. But the
It says in the commentary, yes.
Oh, that it was. Okay. So
Rat bag.
okay. So Ralbag.
Ralbag.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens is that this becomes a process, that he sees the intermarriage, he decides that there's got to be something to. So the first thing that he does is he says, he goes out to them and he says, and he threatens them. Okay. And he beats some of them, the men. And then after they are still not listening to him, then he goes out and we don't know how long,
Their hair.
and he tears their hair out. And that means, I really mean business. Do you not get it?
Yeah.
I'm serious about this. You need to stop this, and you need to swear that you're not going to do this. And then he sucks it to them with a guilt trip. And what's the guilt trip? Which is poignant and to the point. He says in Pasuk 26, did not Shlomo HaMelech, the king of Israel, sin over this? The same thing that you're doing, the greatest, the most beloved of kings in the eyes of Hashem, the man who said he wanted wisdom and got wisdom. When he brought in his foreign wives, in the end, what was his downfall? His downfall was that these women were praying, although they supposedly converted, they really didn't convert, and they brought in idol worship, and they brought in altars to their gods, and it looked as if Shlomo was allowing this and condoning this amongst his wives. And so Nehemiah says, do you think for 1 minute that you are smarter, stronger, or better than Shlomo HaMelech? Do
Right.
you think you've got more fortitude to keep Judaism than even the king who is beloved in the eyes of Hashem? So he's really sticking it to the people and saying, look at what you're doing. You're no better than Shlomo HaMelech. And look what happened to him. So cut this out now. Stop it. We've got to end this assimilation and intermarriage. So at the beginning, when Ezra comes, remember, he is hell-bent on getting rid of the intermarriage. But Nechemiah now sees that not only is it intermarriage, but when he says that the children can't even speak the language of the Jews, he's saying there's assimilation, that they're losing their Judaism.
Right.
So he's fighting a double battle. Ezra was against intermarriage, but we didn't hear that they had lost and assimilated their Judaism, but they were intermarrying. Ezra says, no, this must stop. So I find these words extremely strong and powerful. I think the fact that he likens them to Shlomo HaMelech is very powerful. And if they didn't listen to that, well, what else can you say?
Yeah.
Rhonda, was this, as far as him being violent to people, was there any time previous to this? I don't remember where he was violent, because this just seems like a totally different, way of dealing with it, and kind of shocked me, to be honest with you. Was there any?
But he tried everything else and nothing else worked.
Yeah, he really, yeah, exactly. I don't remember at this particular second, off the top of my, whether there was, I don't think there's been any other real violence. I know that he's gotten pretty upset with people. He's thrown them out. He threw out Tobiah that we read, that was installed by the Kohen Gadol in the Beit HaMikdash. He was pretty angry about that, but I don't think he assaulted him. I don't think there was any issues of assault there.
Okay,
But
thank you.
but he's really, really angry. He is very angry. Okay, so let's find out what's going on here now. And on 27, so shall we listen to you and to do all this great wickedness, being faithless to your God, to our God, by marrying alien wives. He just will not allow this. And 28, one of the sons of Yoachada, the son of Eliashab, the Kohen Gadol. So this means one of the sons of the Kohen Gadol, who is
Married.
right, who is really in line to take over, possibly the being Kohen, has married as the son-in-law of Sanballat, the Horonite. We know that Sanballat is the enemy of the Jews. He did not want the Jews to come back to Jerusalem. He also know that he did everything he could with, who did he work with? Sanballat had two other cohorts. One was Tobiah that we read about last week, and the other one I think was Geshem, the Arab. Now those three were the ones who were the welcoming party to Nehemiah's wave of Aliyah, taunting them and ridiculing them and making it very difficult to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. So we know that Sanballat is not the friend of the Jews. And yet the son of the Kohen Gadol
Married into that family.
marries the daughter of Sanballat. Now, what happens, first of all, it says here the son, it could also be the grandson, because there's the Mefarshim are not clear as to whether it was the son or the grandson, but in either case, it says that this particular son was despised. He talks about, let's see, it says he despised the priesthood in 29. Remember them, my God, says Nechemiah, for despising the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levium. In other words, this son, whose name does not appear, this man despised being a Levite. He despised being part of the Kohanim, and he marries the daughter of Sanballat, and he is now banished. He's banished, and the daughter of Sanballat is banished from Jerusalem. Nehemiah says, you can no longer come into Jerusalem to visit. He says that to Sanballat. And if you recall, this son, this priest who marries the daughter, is installed eventually in Samaria in another temple. I don't know if you remember, but we learned this at the beginning of Nechemiah when we were introduced to Sanballat, that he had a daughter who married a Jew, and he was a Kohen, and because of Nechemiah throwing them out, he installs him somewhere in some temple up in Samaria to be the priest. And we don't.
Can I read to you what it says here about that?
Yes.
Sanballat later approached Alexander the Great and requested that he construct a temple on Mount Gerizim near the city of Shechem, where he ousted son-in-law would officiate as Kohen Gadol. The request was granted. Alexander the Great.
Okay. Interesting that it says that because the Greeks are knocking at the door of Persia at this time. Remember that the world history is not always about the Jews.
Right.
We sometimes forget there's another world. And consequently, what's going on now is that the Persian Empire is struggling to hold on to its stronghold of being an empire, because the Greeks are amassing troops, they're growing in power, and they're getting ready to conquer the Persian Empire.
Right, and they do.
Eventually they do. And that's why we have hints of the Greeks, Alexander the Greek, in reference to this. It must then be the grandson because of the Kohen Gadol, because the Greeks don't come after Nehemiah for about, I think, about 200, almost start and come to Israel for 100 and some years. I think it's 100 and some years. So it's got to be several generations after this Eliashab's grandson that this happens. Not all time is in the right proportion in some of this history, as we have found out. So the point is that Nehemiah just cannot fathom that this will happen, that there is a Kohen Gadol in waiting, a son of a Kohen Gadol, and consequently he removes them. He also doesn't want this to be an example to the other Levium, that it's okay to marry foreign wives. He doesn't want them to take on other women in their homes, because they have sacred positions. They have roles and jobs of leadership, and they are to be examples for the Bnei Yisrael. So Nehemiah feels that the city has to have examples of good behavior and not bad behavior.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
And we know about when Nehemiah came from Babel.
No, but Persia.
Well, wasn't it Babylonia?
No, Persia.
Persia?
Persia.
Oh, okay. Anyway, we know when he approximately when he came, and you're talking about this is his career. So would you say this would be over 20 years period of time, or 30 years, or any estimate?
More.
Yeah, it's not a long period of time. Some of the commentators say it might be about 20 over the entire period of time where he comes, then he goes back to
He
Persia
comes
and comes back again. Could be 20, 30 years. It's not a long period of
Okay.
time at all.
Mhm, mhm.
And I'll make additional comments. Let's finish up the
Rhonda, can I
yes.
ask you something?
Sure.
Okay, what bothers me about this whole thing is hitting him and tearing out his hair. Is that really an effective way to do anything, to convince anybody? To me, the idea, this is your position and you're a holy people, and if you don't do what is holy, if you don't do this, then you are banished from being Jewish. At some point, either being Jewish is valuable, and to me, that would hit them more, your family, your friends and everything. I don't think doing something like that is as effective, because if it's not in his generation, you banish your wife and there's resentment and all that. I don't see it humanely. And the other thing is Ruth,
Well,
who was,
the prohibition was against the men
The man, not the women.
marrying, coming in and marrying. The women, it
but
was
the-
because of Ruth. We learned that the Moabite women did come in and marry.
okay, but what I'm saying is, if he has such authority to do this
Mhm.
and close the gates, why didn't he have the authority, like, you can't belong to the Jewish people anymore, you don't deserve it, or that's one of the things, or are you just, to me, it doesn't make sense for future generations to say that's what you do, because isn't that what the Catholic Church did? They tortured, they this, they that to the Jews till either they died or they converted. So to me, it's not a good example.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that in your question, a lot of things, a lot of references. First of all, you have to understand that maybe tearing out their hair while it says that it was actually happened, we don't really know what that means. It could have meant, someone getting a real,
Haircut.
engaged in some kind of physical
But is that
challenging.
the way to change somebody?
Well, in those days, clearly it was, to have a physical challenge. You know,
39 lashes, it says.
what?
39 lashes
Where does that come from?
in the commentary.
39 lashes? I don't, okay. Who says that and for
Just
what?
a minute.
So in terms of what he was trying to do, he's giving them a punch to say, look, shape up. This is not good behavior and you know it. You know that what you've done is wrong. And so consequently, we're giving you an opportunity to change your ways. There, nobody, including the Beit Din, the Sanhedrin, nobody ever did major punishment because we don't want to lose Jews. We want them to stay. We want them to understand what they're doing is wrong. Change your ways, and you'll be blessed. You'll be welcome and part of the community. So our mission isn't to harm people or throw them out. We never want to throw our Jews out. We try and rehabilitate them. We try and get them to see the error of their ways, but we really never, do the excommunication kind of thing. It's just not something.
It's something we didn't do,
Yeah.
so
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
history.
No,
So,
but Laurie's right. Physical violence and punishing people doesn't help. It's like the Taliban. I mean, that's how he's behaving. He's,
well, the
have to
Taliban
persuade people.
Taliban are beheading people and stringing them up in front of people. Let's
Yeah,
pulling
let's go.
Not
someone's
go that
hair
far.
out is not what the Taliban are doing. Let's okay. That let's not compare what Nechemiah is doing to Taliban. Second of all, you have to remember these are thousands of years ago. That life was different. There, we do not do the same things now and we don't pull out people's hair, although we may clearly want to, but we don't. But you have to remember times were different, and this may well have been a way of punishing people or getting their attention. So let's look at the concept rather than the particular here, and understand that what Nechemiah was doing was trying to get them back on track. Okay. Any other comments? Clearly, I love your comments. I love the interaction. I just want you to understand it was a different time, a different
Yes.
place. Okay. All right. So let's finish up here. He says in 29 to remember this guy in the priesthood, for he really despised it and he was not a good guy. And he says to God, let's see. Okay. He says, I cleaned, I cleanse them from all that is alien and establish the watches of Kohanim and Leviim, each at his work, and also for the wood offerings and the prearranged times, and then the times of the first fruits. So here he's just summarizing the other things that he is doing. He's making sure that there is sanctity among the Leviim and Kohanim and their jobs and their tasks. He did not go into detail again about the Kohanim and the Leviim, but he says he brought a a routine and a regiment that was appropriate for the Kohanim and the Levium, each at his work at whatever they were doing, whether they were in the Beit HaMikdash or whether they were at the gates, the keeper of the gates, whether they were running the Beit HaMikdash and representing the people or doing the sacrifices. He made sure that everything was in order and everything was done properly. And then he says he also made sure that the wood offering, remember we had people who had drawn lots and were going to take care of providing wood for the Beit HaMikdash. He made sure that all that prearrangement was in order and taken care of. And he said he also made sure that the Bikurim were remembered and brought at the appropriate time. So these were the things that were important to him: Shabbat, intermarriage and assimilation, the wood and the wood donations, and the Bikurim, because the Bikurim meant that they were brought to the Beit HaMikdash, to the Levium, and that they would be the tithes would be given at the appropriate time and not helter-skelter or not at all, like he had found when he returned from Persia. And at the end of the sentence, he says, "My God, remember me for good." And then that's it. That's the end of the chapter. That's the end of the Sefer.
The book, yeah.
That's the end of the Sefer. So in the end, so what do we see here? We see that the things that Nechemiah was strongly attached to in Judaism were the things that he fought for. He made sure the walls of the city were secure. He made sure that there was a population in the city. He made sure that people were Shomer Shabbat in the proper way. He made sure that those who had taken on foreign wives no longer had those wives. He made sure that the Lashon of the Jewish people were restored through not intermarrying and bringing in foreign wives. He made sure that the temple was run properly, and he made sure that the temple had wood and that the Levium and the Kohanim had the Bikurim. He had major league jobs to do. This is remarkable. This is huge, huge. And so in the end, it's kind of like abrupt. He leaves us and it's not clear as to what extent he truly succeeds in his efforts to address all these issues that I've just mentioned. But his call for recognition in this particular chapter seems to say that maybe he felt he was limited in his success. Maybe he didn't see the success in his lifetime. And we do not know what happens after this to Nechemiah. We don't know if he stays any longer in Israel, in Judah. We don't know whether he goes back to Persia and dies in Persia, or he lives out his life in Israel. We don't know that he has a family. We don't know really much about him at this point. Given that Nechemiah's remarkable achievements are quite notable, it seems that God does remember him by allowing his Sefer to be included in Tanakh. And it is the last Sefer of the canonized books of Tanakh. he really has to battle and he battles for the hearts and the minds of the people, the Jewish nation, and he is his words are very, very similar in nature to Yirmiyahu, because Yirmiyahu at the time before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, at the time of the kings, he was always prophesizing and prophesying about, if you don't change your ways, then God will punish us and we will be scattered. People didn't believe it. People didn't believe there would be a conquest. And so I think Nechemiah is picking up the mantle of the prophet Yirmiyahu. He's making sure that there will be Judaism in generation after generation, that there will be a set of rules, a set of laws, a way of doing things that is commensurate with Torah law. Now, this means we have completed Sefer Nechemiah. However, I want to take next week. Okay, so let's stop. Stop here. I'm going to stop the recording because now we're going to talk about our plans for next week and learning Malachi. Okay. Let's see. Here. I can't, my computer is terrible. All right, so as soon as I can.
And or that ends the whole connection.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Let's see, this is not, anyway, next week, we are going to read 3 chapters.
Recording is in the stop recording.